South Africans may be buying down, but they've never really liked truly small cars. In the South African context, a small car that's popular is a Volkswagen Polo, a Toyota Yaris, a Ford Fiesta, or a Mazda 2. But the cars that have been struggling are really small cars like the Peugeot 107, the Citroën C1, and even the Suzuki Alto. Which begs the question, why is Toyota launching the tiny Aygo in this country? Together with the Peugeot 107 and the Citroën C1, the Toyota Aygo is the result of a joint venture between the French PSA Group and Toyota. They are even produced in the same factory. The underpinnings and dimensions of the three are identical, but the exterior styling has been adapted to create a slightly different appearance for each model in line with each marque's corporate identity. The Aygo was launched internationally in 2005, but this is the mildly facelifted version which has been available in Europe since 2009. It looks a bit like a Yaris from the front, but the proportions are short and chunky, very much like the Peugeot 107 and the C1, which it shares its mechanicals with. The Aygo is perhaps the most conservative member of the threesome, but its almost toy-like demeanor means it still exudes a certain cute factor. Adding to its poised, almost pugnacious personality is the positioning of the wheels at each corner of the car, which maximizes the wheelbase and the interior dimensions without bloating the Aygo's proportions. The roofline is comparatively high, also benefiting cabin space. This top Aygo version is called the Wild. One of the stars of the Aygo show is the engine. It's a 1-litre 3-cylinder unit with 12 valves and twin cams. Produces 50 kilowatts at a buzzy 6,000 RPM. 93 newton meters of torque, which doesn't sound that much, but in fact is pretty ample, considering that this car only weighs 830 kilos. And in fact, the power-to-weight ratio here is 60 kilowatts per tonne. Less impressive is the poor paint finish under the bonnet, which has to make do with base coat and some overspray. On a different note, the engine sounds fantastic. There's a husky gruffness to the exhaust note that is completely out of kilter with the notion of a small, almost lawnmower-sized engine. Given the compact exterior dimensions, the cabin comes as a very pleasant surprise. It's a lot more spacious, a lot airier and lighter than you'd expect, and the interior execution is both contemporary and even hip. These front seats look a little bit flimsy, but they're in actual fact quite comfortable to sit in, and even the space at the rear is quite viable, but the boot is tiny. At least the split rear backrest can be folded down to provide more loading space. The instruments are limited to a single large dial containing the speedometer, odometer and trip meter, as well as the fuel gauge. The rest is handled by warning lights and there's no rev counter. The steering wheel feels too small and too close to the instrument cluster, and adjustment scope is limited. Still, the Aygo Wild is impressively equipped with many of the bells and whistles usually associated with dearer cars. Toyota claims a 0-100 time of 14.2 seconds at a top speed of 157 kilometers an hour. But don't be fooled by those figures, because this car actually feels a lot nippier, a lot quicker than those figures suggest. It's great around town, very maneuverable, very zippy in traffic, but it also cruises quite nicely on the open road. Only problem with this car is if you do load it down with 4 passengers and luggage, it really doesn't like hills. So, a lot more fun to drive than I expected. For many would-be Aygo buyers, however, the promise of a frugal appetite for unleaded petrol will be the strongest drawcard. Toyota claims a combined cycle fuel consumption figure of 4.6 litres per 100, but in reality the figure is more likely to be in the 5 to 5.5 litre bracket, suggesting a range of more than 600 kilometres from the 35-litre fuel tank. It may have been recently facelifted, but in essence the Aygo is still a 6-year-old car. So how does it shape up against a more modern but direct competitor from a small car specialist like Suzuki? They're similar in terms of size, engine capacity and even price. In fact, there's only 200 rands between these two cars. On the road, the Alto feels more planted and more substantial. It has the quieter cabin and a better seating position. The handling feels more sure-footed and more confidence-inspiring, and there is better steering feedback. However, the stats suggest that it's heavier and slower, with a peakier engine delivering less torque. It's thirstier too, due to an older technology engine, but the real killer is the Aygo's 4-year service plan, which promises a real reduction in cost of ownership. The Aygo is a case of rather late than never, because in a market which is seeing rises in fuel prices and inflation, the demand for tiny tots like this is certainly growing. It's a car that carries its age quite well, and it offers a good mix of features, dynamics and especially value. The result is a very viable small car we can expect to see lots of these on our roads. It may have a tiny engine and a humble power output, but the Aygo has ample zip and character, while fuel consumption is excellent too. The overall package is economical and fun to drive, while the service plan boosts value. However, the Aygo lacks refinement and some finishes disappoint, while the steering is also over-assisted.